So this video is about the evidence for the dispersal of mankind throughout the world after the Genesis flood. So we'll look at some archaeology. There's Nimrod the mighty hunter. We'll look at some ancient writing and historical documents. There's the Nennius manuscript, Historia Brittonum, and we'll look at some recent genetic research. Now, there are two worldviews in the world, and one is creation, and the other one is evolution. So let's just have a little think about the evolution theory. So Charles Lyell and James Hutton, who were contemporary with Charles Darwin, were the major people who laid the foundation for the modern evolutionary theory. And Charles Lyell's ideas on geology influenced Charles Darwin to think in terms of millions of years. And James Hutton made him doubt the flood, paving the way for his theory of evolution. And there's the origin of the species by means of natural selection on the right there. But did you know the other title was Preservation of Favoured Races in the Struggle for Life? In his private correspondence, Charles Lyell admitted to the strongly anti-biblical, anti-Mosaical nature of his ideas. In 1829, just a few months prior to the publication of the first volume of his Principles of Geology, Lyell wrote in a letter to fellow old earth geologist Roderick Murchison, "I trust I shall make my sketch of the progress of geology popular. Old Reverend John Fleming is frightened and thinks this age will not stand my anti-Mosaical conclusions, and at least that the subject will for a time become unpopular and awkward for the clergy. But I'm not afraid. I shall outwit the whole, but in as conciliatory a manner as possible." So Charles Lyell, he wanted to free the science from Moses. And how he did that was looking at all the strata throughout the world and saying, oh, this has happened over millions of years. And yet we can see that all the layers must have happened in one event over a period of time, because they're all straight like pancakes and they have no erosion and no bioturbation in between. Now, Charles Darwin, aged 22, fresh out of school to be a preacher, set sail on the HMS Beagle in 1831. And Darwin brought his Bible because he was going to be a preacher, and Charles Lyell's book, Principles of Geology, on his 5-year voyage. But Hutton's book, Theory of the Earth, published in 1795, made people doubt a recent creation. And Lyell's book, Principles of Geology, in 1830, made people doubt the Genesis flood. And Darwin's book, Origin of the Species, published in 1859, made people doubt the Creator. Well, if we really look at evolution in depth, it's all based on assumptions, wishful thinking, and a great deal of imagination. With that in mind, let's now have a look at the biblical genealogies, historical accounts of the Ark remains, flood accounts worldwide, the Tower of Babel, ancient manuscripts of world human history, and recent barcoding of DNA genetic population research. And at the end, I'll show a few genetic scientific studies which go completely against evolution. So there's a genealogy chart which we have in our ecclesia, our church, and it's all about the genealogies from Adam right through to the Lord Jesus. Now in Genesis chapter 10, Noah's descendants, it says, now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And unto them were sons born after the flood, So we can see there the sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech and Tiras. And the sons there in purple from Gomer, they are the grandsons of Noah. Now we get the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Phut, Canaan and Cush. And there's Noah's grandsons again. And we get Nimrod, and the green is the place names. Unto Shem also the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth. And again we see in the purple all the grandsons of Noah. So I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. You can easily look this up in Genesis. So we'll just move on now and have a look at some other interesting things. So this is about non-biblical accounts of the historical remains of Noah's Ark. And this is Flavius Josephus, and he was, he was writing not long after the Lord Jesus, and he stated that in the land called Caro, there were in it the remains of the ark, wherein it is related that Noah escaped the deluge, and where they are still shown to such as are desirous to see them. Also, however, the Armenians call this place the place of descent, for the ark being saved in that place, its remains are showed there by the inhabitants to this day. This is Theophilus of Antioch, so that's 115 AD, when he was born and when he died. And of the ark, the remains are to this day to be seen in the Arabian mountains. And by the Arabian mountains, he simply means the mountains inhabited and controlled by the Arab nations. Epiphanes of Salamis, Bishop of Salamis, do you seriously suppose that we are unable to prove our point when even to this day the remains of Noah's Ark are shown in the country of the Kurds? So that was in about 403 AD. Then we've got John Chrysostom. So he was born 349 and lived till 407. But he said, have you heard of the flood, of that universal destruction? That was not just a threat, was it? Did it not really come to pass? Was not this mighty work carried out? Do not the mountains of Armenia testify to it, where the ark rested? And are not the remains of the ark preserved there to this day for our admonition? Now he's talking about Armenia there. Well, Armenia borders have moved up north now, so Armenia was once quite a lot lower down. There we've got the Isidore of Seville. He was born 560 AD he lived till 636. A scholar and for over 3 decades Archbishop of Seville. He wrote, Ararat is a mountain in Armenia, where the historians testify that the ark came to rest after the flood. So even to this day, wood remains of it are to be seen there. So that's 1,500 years ago. We could still see wood from the remains of the ark. Berosus Chaldeus, 3rd century. To this day, a small part of the ship that came to rest in Armenia remains in the Gordian mountains in Armenia, and some people go there and scrape off pieces of pitch to keep them as good luck charms. So there's lots more writings about the remains of the ark, but this, I don't want to make the video too long. So let's now just have a look at a bit of archaeology. So this is cuneiform stones, so it's stories, accounts written on stones. You might have heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now these are Sumerian cuneiforms and Akkadian cuneiforms, and mostly they're from Iraq, different places in Iraq, but they all tell the story of a great deluge where a family was saved, and there was animals, and they all got off the ark at a particular time. So here we have global flood legends. There's lots of global flood legends around the world. These are just a few. So there in South America, we've got the Incans, we've got the Arawaks, we move up, we've got the Mayans, the Aztecs, and in North America, we've got the Pawnees, and we've got the Montegols. And over there, we've got the Norse, the Vikings, the Greeks, Arcadians, Sumerians, and we've got the Gilgamesh epic. We've got in South Africa the Maasai tribes, the Rakwa tribes, and we've got over in the Far East, we've got the Meizo, the Chinese. We've got the Aboriginals from Australia, and we've got Hawaii and Fiji. These are just some of the flood legends that we've got all around the world. Now, the flood traditions, the ones from Assyria, they've got all the accounts that we've got in the Bible. Man in transgression, a divine destructor, favourite family, an ark provided, destruction by water, human saved, animal saved, universal destruction, the flood, landing on a mountain, birds sent out, and survivors worshipping a divine favour on the saved. And we have a lot, so we've got there Syria, Asia Minor, Greece, Egypt, Italy. But there we've got Cree in Canada, the Cherokee in the US, the Papago in Mexico, the Aztecs in Mexico, and we've got Peru, the Leeward Islands, Fiji Islands, Hawaii. So we've got all these flood traditions. They haven't all got the full account that we have in Genesis, but it's amazing that around the world we've got all these flood traditions. So in Genesis chapter 7, in verse 1, it says, And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house unto the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Now, I'm not going to read all of it. You can easily go to Genesis and read it for yourselves. But there it says, Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. Now, after the flood, we can start reading that in Genesis 8. And God spake unto Noah, saying, Go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee, and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. Genesis chapter 9, it says again, And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth. Genesis 10, These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations, in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. And Genesis 11, we start to see about the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. So now we're looking at Babel. So in Genesis chapter 11 it says, So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So Babel, that's where we get our word babbling from, because the language was confounded. So Ham moved to Africa, Japheth moved to Europe, Shem moved to Asia. But it wasn't quite as simple as that. Ham didn't just go into Africa with all his family and his grandsons, and Japheth didn't just go into Europe with all his, and Shem over to Asia. It was more like this. So there we see the descendants of Japheth, all the blue there. And so we've got Tarshish, Javan, Gomer, Meshech, Magog. We've got Tyras, Ashkenaz, Togarmah, Philistia. But the descendants of Europe were mostly from Gomer and Javan. But also they travelled east, and the descendants of Magog went into Asia and over into what we call Russia today. Now the descendants of Ham, we've got Phut, Mizraim, Egypt, Canaan, Dedan, Sheba, and we have Heth, Nimrod, Ramah, and these are the descendants of Ham. So yes, descendants of Ham did go down into Africa, but they also went east into Asia. And then Shem, we've got Asher, Aram, Elam, Lud, Arphaxad, and we've got Joktan, Havlah, Uzal, Sheba, Ophir, and we can see that they all, after the dispersal, they all spread quite a distance from the very Middle East. So we got the descendants of Shem, and Nimrod, descendant of Ham. He was the one that was the mighty hunter, and we know that he was responsible for the building of Babylon, of Babel, the Tower of Babel. So there's the Tower of Babel, the painting, famous painting by Bruegel, and so that was painted in the Middle Ages. So of course they're not clothed like they would have been those thousands of years ago. And there is a lot of paintings depicting a round tower. There's another one, but the Tower of Babel was probably a ziggurat like that, because we see lots of archaeological remains of ziggurats all throughout the world today. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about Nimrod, the empire builder, and the start of Babylon Tower. If you go to Douglas Petrovich, he's an archaeologist, very famous, and he's done a lot of research on the Tower of Babel and the temples where the Tower of Babel was. So there's a stela of Nimrod. He began to be the mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And there's a bigger picture of it. And he's thrusting a sword through that lion there because he was a mighty hunter. Now in Mesopotamia, so you can see the temple ruins there of Eridu and Uruk, and that's where the Tower of Babel was more than likely built, because they say that they can see the foundations and the big square of where the Tower of Babel was. But if you actually look at the ruins, it looks more like this. So if you want to know a bit more, go to Douglas Petrovich and he can give you a lot more detail. Now in there's a ziggurat, which is now a tourist ziggurat, and this is it before and after reconstruction. So there it is in 1929, and the government decided to rebuild it because lots and lots of people know about Babel, and that's it there today as a tourist attraction. Now the Babel stele or stele, so it's not very clear on that image there, but on the image is that diagram, and that is Nimrod. We've got a tower there, a ziggurat, and we've actually got a little bit of the writing, and that's also the foundations of the temple. So if we look at it now, that's what it is on the actual stele, and you can actually see the steps of the ziggurat there. So that's Nimrod. Now we have ziggurats in South and North America. Now those ones there are in South America, and it wasn't till the 1800s that we knew that these existed, because we didn't have aeroplanes to fly over and see these, and they were all pretty much lost in the jungle. But in the 1800s, explorers and archaeologists started to discovering all these civilizations that were buried in the jungle, and they found there was a lot of farming going on, big cities, and these ziggurats. And so now these days we've got a lot of them uncovered, and they're magnificent buildings, and they're all over the place. That one there is actually in North America. So how and why do we see ziggurats in the Americas? Some that have been buried in the jungle? Well, the logical conclusion for me is that the early American civilizations, the Aztecs, the Mayan, the Incas, came over the Bering Straits from Siberia into America soon after the dispersal from Babel. And this can clearly be seen in recent genetic research. And also the almanacs, they were in Mexico, and there's still a lot of archaeological remains of the almanacs. So this now is an evolutionary out of Africa theory mitochondrial DNA haplogroup map. And this is from 2012. I downloaded it many years ago. And you'll notice it says there that the people in Africa were 170,000 years ago. They came out of Africa and spread across the world. And there we've got the people who went over to the Americas were 20,000 years ago. Well, 20,000 years ago? I'm afraid I don't think so. Recent genetic research is discovering that the migration to the Americas was only a few thousand years ago. Now, evolutionists are still sticking to their story, and unfortunately it's all collapsing now. It's falling apart because the evidence is all there. So this map is now very outdated. Now this is genome research in 2015, research by Carmen Monica et al. A recent bottleneck of Y chromosome diversity coincides with a global change in culture. Now you can go to this paper easily. There's lots and lots of scientific papers about this genome research, and this is in Genome Research volume 25. Now it says there a recent bottleneck of the Y chromosome diversity coincides with a global change in culture. Well, the evolutionary out of Africa theory cannot logically explain the recent bottleneck. Some of the evolutionists are putting it down to the start of agriculture, but the most recent bottleneck, as far as people who believe in creation, is the global flood. And unfortunately, the evolutionists, they will not accept the obvious evidence for the Genesis flood, like all the absolute straight horizontal layers in the strata that we see all around the world, and also the obvious evidence that all the fossils are young because we have soft tissue in them. So here's a DNA barcoding XY chromosome of the male DNA. This is recent. This is from 2024, And note it's not out of Africa anymore. And we can also check back on female mitochondrial XX haplogroups, but this one is male. Now note there we've got R1A and R1B. They were the people that moved mostly into Europe, but they did move other places. And we've got QR. So we've got R1A, R1B, and QR. Now QR, we can see the haplogroup Q, that it came from, Europe, Middle East, and it also, so when they went over the Bering Strait, that's where we got the early American civilizations of the Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Olmecs. And we can see this in the haplogroups. So there we've got the Eskimo haplogroup, and we've got the Argentinians, we've got the Andes Mountain peoples, and we've got people by Lake Titicaca. So up there is the Siberian migration. So we've got lots of detailed information now in the modern genetic research. So haplogroup DNA data of the male Y chromosome. So there we got R1A, R1B, and R1A and R1B is European Western dispersion mostly. And there we've got Q, the haplogroup Q. That's the migration over the Bering Strait to the Americas. So recent extensive DNA research of haplogroups worldwide is actually neatly fitting with the dispersion from Babel in the last 4,000 plus years. And that one on the right, on the left, the haplogroup R1A, that's just to show you how they split, the haplogroups into different groups, culture groups. So now we're going to look at historical genealogical records of mankind's ancestry worldwide. So this is in the writings that we still got with us today and we can still refer to. Now from Noah to Woden right up to the 1700s, there are several patriarchal genealogies recorded of the Norwegians, Danes, Icelanders and English Saxons as found in many ancient documents. Some of them are British Museum Cotton Manuscript Tiberius A from 700 AD, Assyrius de Rubus Gestis Alfredi from 893 AD. We've got prose, which is like poetry, from Ida and Nennius in the Historia Brittonum in 830 AD. We've got Betosissima Regium Septentronius Langfethgatal Dicta from 1380 AD. And we've got Fabi Ethwelwerdi Chronicorum Libri Quator from 1596 AD. And we've also got the 6 royal houses of the Anglo-Saxons: House of Lindsey, House of Kent, House of Mercia, House of Northumbria, the House of East Anglia, and the House of Wessex. We've got an amazing amount of written documents that traces back right the way through, back from Noah, right back to Adam and Eve. This is a manuscript of the early British kings and many other lines of descent from Adam to the earliest times. And a copy of the manuscripts are exhibited in the British Museum. The originals are in Lambeth Palace. So there we see manuscript showing the descent of the lines of descent from Adam and the earliest times. And on the right there we've got manuscript showing the descent of Henry VI from Adam, and it's in Lambeth Palace, and that's dating back to the 15th century. And that's the manuscript of Henry VI. I couldn't blow it up anymore, but we can get it in a lot further detail. So there are lots of ancient manuscripts and books that describe the genealogies going right back to Noah and to Adam. So there's the Broken Edda. There's the Historia Danison of Saxons. There is the Historia Regum Britannia. There's the Geoffrey of Monmouth. And there we've got Nennius Irish ancestry. And we can't look at all these books, but they're very interesting and it's good to go and explore them. But here we have the genealogical tables of the emperors, kings and sovereign princes before and after the commencement of the Christian era. And there we've got the second part. And these are written by James Anderson in 1736, who referred back to a lot more ancient manuscripts and writings and very, very detailed accounts of the genealogies of the whole world from Adam to these times. So this is Royal Genealogies from Adam to these times by James Anderson, 1736. And you can easily find this on Google Books. And I find it fascinating. So there's the emperors and kings and princes from Adam to these times in 2 parts. And what you can do is you can go to all the pages. Now we'll just go to contents, because I think it's amazing that Google Books have actually linked all the different chapters and all the different sections, and you can click on one of those in the contents and you'll come to, so there's the genealogy of Christ's family, and it's very easy to do this, and it's got so much detail in and absolutely fascinating. So there you can click back onto all the many pages, and you can just click on one and go to so that's the king that reigned in Sparta, and it tells you all the dates, it tells you who his wife was, and you know all the people from then. You know, it's very, very interesting. So there's quite a lot of the old manuscripts that you can find on the Google Books and also the Internet archives. So there's about just under 700 pages, I think, on this one. Absolutely full of detail. So Royal Genealogies, or the Genealogical Table of Emperors, Kings and Princes from Adam to these times in 2 parts. Amazing. So we'll now look at some screenshots that I've done from this James Anderson book. And there we've got emperors and kings, sovereign princes, before and after the commencement of the Christian era from Adam to these times. Now there we've got the antediluvian and the post-diluvian patriarchs from Adam to Jacob. And you know, we can see there we've got Noah going down to Gomer, Javan, Ashkenaz, Aram and Joktan, and so on. And it's absolutely amazing that we've got all these. Now there we've got Nebuchadnezzar, who took the city of Tyre after a blockade of 13 years. And there we've got King Solomon, and we've got all the politics of his time, and you know the time that when Israel enjoyed quite a long peace. There we've got Antiochus Epiphanes, and you know, of course, he was the one that he actually in the time of the temple, you know, the Israelites, he was an abomination of desolation because he sacrificed a pig in the temple. And there we've got there the early rulers of Rome: Romulus, Julius, Titurius, Horatius. There we've got Emperor Nero, Caligula. These are absolutely detailed chronicles of the genealogies. They tell us the dates, they tell us the spouses, they tell us the battles that were going on, the politics. And there we've got the death of Queen Cleopatra, to the founding of the Third Temple, in the first year of Augustus, the Emperor of Rome, and then the 9th year of Herod, the great King of Judea. And there we've got the various espousals whereby Austria, Bohemia, Hungary, Poland, Lithuania and Sweden have been united together. So they've been united together by marriages. Different nations have been united together through their marriage. This is the first kings of Spain after the confusion of Babel, when the dispersion began, not long after the global flood, after Noah got off the ark with his sons. So there we got Noah, Ham, Shem, Japheth, and this document, this particular part, you can trace right the way through from Noah, right the way through to the early first kings of Spain. Likewise, we can do that with the princes and tsars of Tuscany or Russia. So there we've got the sons of Japheth who travelled from China after the dispersion to the north and the northeast of Syria. A large colony of them travelled further northward into Tuscany and so on. There we've got the old chieftain kings of Denmark, kings of Hungary, and there we've got Attila the Hun, born in AD 330. And it says there that he was a terror of the world and a scourge of God. Now here we have the genealogical tables of the Britannic Isles. And here we have, I'll highlight it, the first inhabitants must needs come from the ancient continent, as islands were generally peopled, and the posterity of Japheth, who soon after the dispersion of the nations from Shinar, which began in AM 1810, before the Christian era 2194, travelled northward into Scythia and northwest into Europe, soon reached over the West Sea coasts of Germany, France, Spain, and from thence, they came into Britain. And this is just the beginning. It goes into great detail of, how the Britons came to be there from Noah all the way through from Adam. So the fabulous kings of Britain before the first descent of Julius Caesar, because it goes in great detail. So there's Brute the First, King of Britain. So there it says he reigned 1100 to 1077 BC. And if you go down, to Bladud King, he reigned in 865 BC. There we got the chronology of the Roman lieutenants of Britain. Very, very detailed, because there was lots and lots of people coming and going from Rome in the early days of the kingdoms. And where we've got Julius Caesar being desirous to enlarge the conquests and observing that the Gauls had been much supplied against him by the Britons, intended to invade the island. And then when he did actually invade, his expedition into Britain, he came with 25,000 footmen and 4,500 horses. And if you go on down this, it tells you how many ships they had, where they landed, how long it took for them, the soldiers, to get all organised and everything. It's absolutely amazing. There we've got the original Saxon heptarchy of England, and you'll see there that we've got the Anseric King of Saxons in AM 4004 or AD 1. So that was the time when the Lord Jesus was born. And then right down the bottom we've got the Wilkie II, Prince of the Saxons, AD 190. And then we've got Bodo or Woden, King of the Saxons, in 2005-6 AD, and he reigned till 300 AD. And interestingly, he was also the desired Mars. So we'll move on now. Kings and princes of Wales. And it says the inhabitants of the country at the first invasion of Julius Caesar are accounted for in page 727. Well, we're not going to go there. And after the Britons were forced to content themselves with these countries, they were governed by the kings and descendants of these people. The origin of the Irish monarchy. So here we have the first colonies that came to Ireland, the first after the flood, 270 years, and the fourth landed in AM 2507, so that's BC, or 6 years before the Exodus of Moses. And it was talking there about a little before the siege of Troy. So it's amazing that they've got all this detail, and this is just the beginning of the Irish origin, and you can go into great detail about it all. There we've also got Farfa, great son of Japheth, and his son Neuel and his offspring, with their circuits backwards and forward between Scythia and Egypt, up and down through Europe, Asia and Africa, until they settled in Spain, as in table 522. So this now is a summary of 6 different manuscripts. So there is what the manuscripts are from, and there's the key. Now what's fascinating to me is that we got 6 different manuscripts written in 6 different countries at 6 different times by independent writers, and yet they all actually tie up with the same information in the genealogies. Now Nennius there doesn't catch up until we get to Gita or Eat or Jat, but then he carries on, and he's in total agreement with all the others. And then we get to Woden or Voden, and then we get Voden, and from Voden we get the Royal House of Norway and the Royal House of Denmark. Now interestingly, for Bible readers, this is not Shem or Seth. It's been translated from Japheth. We haven't got time to go into that, but if you go to James Anderson 1736 book, it explains exactly how this was translated. So from Noah to Woden, from Woden to the 6 royal houses of the Anglo-Saxons, we can see how it all comes from Adam to Noah to Woden, and there we have the descendants from Woden, and we have 5 of the houses of the royal houses of the Anglo-Saxons, and we'll carry on now and look at the 6th house, who was Alfred the Great. And there we have Alfred the Great. Now this is a summary, and it's summary from all the manuscripts, from people like James Anderson, from Geoffrey of Monmouth. And if you want to go into greater detail, I got a lot of this information from After the Flood, which is a book by Bill Cooper. Unfortunately he's dead now, but he's a very clever man. He studied all this for over 25 years and dug out, researched lots of the manuscripts, and this book is full of information of how you can find these manuscripts and go to them and see that we're all descended from Adam through to Noah, right to the Lord Jesus and to modern day. This is the Illustrated History of Ireland, published in 1868, but also referring back to many Irish manuscripts. I just want to show you that Ireland was first migrated into in 1484 BC by Partholan, and then the next migration in was Namidius, and that was in the 1145 BC. And then there was two brothers who came in and migrated in at 504 BC. Now I think that's absolutely incredible, and a lot of the information has come from all these manuscripts. So there on the left we've got the Historia Brittonum, and that was from Nennius, and there's lots of his writings that can still be seen today. So this is the history of the world in 5 books by Sir Walter Raleigh. Now I didn't know that Sir Walter Raleigh, while he was in prison for 2 years, wrote the history of the world in 5 books, and it's absolutely fascinating. And we'll have a little look at some screenshots I've taken just of the contents. So there we got the first book, and so these are just sections which are greatly detailed if you go to them. And this one he's talking about the antediluvian people, and then the post-diluvian people, of idolatrous corruptions quickly rising and hardly at length vanishing in the world. And so then after the flood, and the relics of the truth touching the ancient times obscurely appearing in fables and old legends. And that's what we got today with evolution. So there he's talking about, he's got whole sections on the Egyptians, the Canaanites, talking about Heth, the Amorites, the Harkites, Cush, and on the right there we've got Arphaxad, Lud. Absolutely amazing, the details that we've got. So Walter Raleigh's book History of the World can be found on the Internet Archives, and you can have a look at it for yourself. So there we've got the Wars of Troy, and it talks about Helen there. It goes into detail about the horse of Troy, the Trojan horse, and it goes into the politics of Greece, the battles, the end of the Persian Wars. Absolutely amazing details. And it all leads up from Noah right through to Europe and to Asia and all the nations actually forming from them in great detail. So there we've got how Alexander the Great besieged and won the city of Tyre. So he did his battles after Nebuchadnezzar tried for 13 years and failed. But Alexander the Great, he actually conquered the city and the island of Tyre. Now this is just going to show you that there are lots of ancestries from the Muslim ancestry, because we see, they're very interested in their origins. So there we've got Adam, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, and then we've got Ishmael. So that's where their descendants come from. And there, I've just moved on a bit so we can actually see their ancestry comes from Ishmael, and they're down to Muhammad. And it's easy to go to loads of genealogies of the Muslims because they are very interested in their genealogy. Now I just want to mention mutations in generations, which is genetic entropy since the flood. Now Bible readers know that before the flood people lived to great lengths of time. You've heard of Methuselah, he lived a very, very long time. Noah lived a long time, but after the flood, people started not living so long. So that's because at the very beginning of creation, God created men and women with perfect DNA, with no mutations. So that's why they lived a long time. But after the flood, he decided he wasn't going to allow men to live a long time. So now we've got a thing called genetic entropy, and we can see this in a lot of the genetic research in the ENCODE program. And so we'll move on and have a look at that now. So this is Calibrating the Mitochondrial Clock by Anne Gibbons, who was an evolutionist, from Science Journal 279. Now we read there, mitochondrial DNA appears to mutate much faster than expected, prompting new DNA forensics procedures and raising troubling questions about the dating of evolutionary events. Now this paper was written in 1997, and it's interesting to read what she has to say next. So we'll go there. Regardless of the cause, evolutionists are most concerned about the effect of a faster mutation rate. For example, researchers have calculated that mitochondrial Eve, the woman whose mitochondrial DNA was ancestral to all living people 100,000 to 200,000 years ago in Africa. So they're talking about the out of Africa theory. They're saying people were 100,000 years old and they came out of Africa. But using the new clock, the new mitochondrial clock, she would be a mere 6,000 years old. And then she goes on to say, no one thinks that's the case. But at what point should models switch from one mitochondrial DNA time zone to the other? So it's evolutionists that think they don't think that's the case, but all the evidence that's coming out of the genetic research is actually showing us that the human race is only young. So this is a paper written in the late 90s. A high observed substitution rate in the human mitochondrial DNA control region. So that's the female mitochondrial DNA. Now this is Thomas J. Parsons, very famous geneticist. That's him there. And these were some of the team that he wrote this paper with. And it says there that a 25 to 30 year generation time gives you about 6,500 years. And they've got 95% confidence that the human race is about 6,000 to 7,100 years old. Now, the evolutionists don't like this. Now, I'm going to show you what they've got, what Thomas Parsons has got to say about it. So, this was printed in September 2020 because Thomas Parsons is fed up of the criticisms that he's been getting. And he says there, thank you for reaching out. However, I have zero interest in dealing with this redundant argument again. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, I was bombarded with criticisms for my findings. I showed conclusive evidence for over a decade that my conclusions were valid and that they, the criticisers, were wrong. So Thomas Parsons, he actually has got access to all the FBI and CIA data banks for DNA and their forensics. And he says there, if they think my work is invalid, then please tell them to go into the field and prove me wrong. They won't, they haven't, they can't. And I'll tell you why. I crossed every T and dotted every I. I knew my results were going to be scrutinised, so I made sure to account for every possible variable at my disposal. There he goes, my work would also be unpublished if this were the case. And he's talking about the fact that his job is with the International Commission on Missing Persons. So it says, it has been decades and my findings and my research is still the most accurate to date. No one has come close to the sheer volume of data I have at my disposal. If I ran the numbers today, they would be the same as they were in the 90s. If you have a specific question, I will answer it. But as I've said, I have answered all the criticisms in the past. So lots and lots of people are criticising him, but they don't come to him with any actual empirical evidence that can prove him wrong. So I think that's very interesting. So then in 2012, we have got another paper there, and she says this is basically identical to Parsons. Then we've got another one. We've got lots and lots of papers about this. So she says sequences obtained 220 generations for 6,600 years based on a 30-year generation time. I could have put many other papers up which are in the secular literature, but you know, I can't make this video too long. So there we go. So this was from 2018 in May. Massive genetic study reveals 90% of Earth's animals appeared at the same time. And when it says massive genetic study, it was all over the world. And more specifically, they found out that 9 out of 10 animal species on the planet came into being at the same time as humans did. So if you want to go to this paper, the origin of the paper is in Human Evolution, volume 33. And it says there, landmark new research that involves analysing millions of DNA barcodes has debunked much about what we know today about the evolution of the species. There were hundreds of genetic scientists all over the world who were involved in this massive study. Ancient history, Wikipedia. Recorded history is roughly about 5,000 years. Jiangsu, 5,000-year-old Chinese civilization. Shenyun, 5,000 years of civilization reborn. Rare ancient DNA provides a window into 5,000-year-old. So on and so on. All our recorded history goes back to no more than 5,000 years. If we'd have been here longer, we would have had a lot more different writings all over the world in what we find, but we don't. So this is the descent of the Maozo people of China, and you note there the number 1 is dirt. Now Adam was created by God from the dust of the ground, and these are the translations. We got Adam, dirt, Selah, Seth. The two, Malalhilil and Methuselah, they're a little bit vague in the translation, but they think that's what they were. But there is Lama, well, that was Lamech, and we got Noah, and that is Noah, and we even got the name of his wife. And then we've got Lohan, which was Ham, Loshen, which was Shem, and we've got Jephu, which was Japheth. We've even got Cush, Mizraim, Elam, Asher, Gomer. Now, from the writings of Taoist Lao Tzu, who flourished in China in the 6th century BC, in this profound statement, we can see a reference to the existence and attributes of a divine creator. Before time and throughout time, there has been a self-existing being, eternal, infinite, complete, omnipresent. Outside this being, before the beginning, there was nothing. So I think it's amazing that from the 6th century BC, before Christ, we've got all this obviously knowledge of a divine being. Ancient Chinese writing reveals their knowledge of creation, the flood, the Tower of Babel, and the dispersion. So there's an ancient Chinese character of first, and from that we've got 3 characters, which is living, dust, and man. So in Genesis we read that man was created from the dust of the ground, and God breathed life into him. And there we've got garden, and we've got dust, breath, enclosure, person, person, and the persons there are a male person and a female person. So we got Adam and Eve in an enclosure, which was the Garden of Eden, given the breath of life from being created from the dust of the ground, although Eve was created from Adam's rib. There we got Noah and the ark. So we've got two characters there for Noah. First one is promise approved, and second. Now, Noah wasn't the first approved, it was Enoch. So Enoch was the first approved and Noah was the second. There we've got the symbols for ship vessel. So we've got ship, 8 and people. There were 8 people on the ark, so I think that's very significant. The Tower of Babel and the dispersal of nations. So there we got tower, we got mud, straw, people, one, mouth. They're probably mentioning mouth because of the confusion of the languages at that time. Then we got scatter, all, flesh, go. Then we got migrate, great, walk, west, stop. I think this is amazing that in the 6th century, the early Chinese, they knew of the creation of the global flood, of Noah and his descendants, the Tower of Babel, and the dispersion of the nations. Conclusion. All the evidence we see in the world today, from historical records, archaeological discoveries, accounts of the flood by worldwide cultures, genetic population research confirmed by the ENCODE program, all validates God's holy word. Unfortunately, it's all suppressed, manipulated and censored because the Darwinians, they control all the universities, all the science labs, and they don't like the idea of a creator. Because evolution's the ruling paradigm of the day. But there's so much evidence, especially DNA, that's come out of the ENCODE research. If you don't understand how complex DNA is, check out my video of DNA and evolutionary enigma on this channel. So I'll say thanks for watching and bye for now.